Justices questioned Trump tariffs as Supreme Court weighs keeping them. Top takeaways. Trump has called the tariffs crucial to the country's economic health and national security, but justices questioned whether he has the authority to set taxes on imports rather than Congress. Washington. A Supreme Court that has been largely deferential to President Donald Trump's expansive claims of executive authority may be ready to pump the brakes. During nearly 3 hours of debate on November 5, the justices questioned whether Trump has the power to impose sweeping tariffs on most imports. Several legal experts said the justices' questions reveal a lot about where they stand on Trump's policy, which the president has said is about literally life or death for our country. Ashley Ackers, a former Justice Department attorney now with the law firm Holland & Knight, heard a notable skepticism from justices across the ideological spectrum. Overall, it felt like a strong day for the tariff challengers, though it feels like this will be a razor-close case, Ackers said. Several justices were concerned that if they sided with Trump, Congress would lose control over tariffs, even though the Constitution gives that power to lawmakers, said Curtis A. Bradley, an expert on foreign relations law at the University of Chicago Law School. But Todd Tucker, a trade expert at the left-leaning Roosevelt Institute, noted that some justices seemed sympathetic to the administration's argument that it would be odd if the law at issue didn't allow presidents to issue any tariffs, since it clearly lets presidents block imports. Oliver Dunford, an attorney with the Libertarian Pacific Legal Foundation, said the case is complicated enough and the concerns expressed by the justices sufficiently diverse that it's possible the justices may arrive at their decision without a majority collecting around one legal argument. If I had to guess, Dunford said, I'd guess that the court will rule against the president. I can't say enough, it is a regulatory tariff, not a tax, Sauer told Justice Elaine McKagan, explaining that setting limits on imports encourages trade deals with other countries and spurs domestic manufacturing. There's been extremely broad delegations of the power to tariff specifically and the power to regulate foreign commerce more generally, going back to the time of the founding, Sauer told Justice Thomas at another point. Trio of conservatives seems skeptical of president's power to impose tariffs. At least 3 of the 6 conservative justices, Chief Justice John Roberts, Justices Neil Gorsuch, and Amy Coney Barrett, sounded skeptical of the Trump administration's argument. A 4th, Justice Brett Kavanaugh, seemed to be laying out parameters for the questions he wanted answered. He said the justices have to figure out then what regulate importation means in reference to the key phrase in the statute. Roberts said the word tariff doesn't appear in the 1977 International Emergency Economic Powers Act that Trump used to justify much of his tariff regime, which had previously been used for sanctions. And Roberts explicitly said tariffs are a tax. And that has always been the core power of Congress, he said, meaning that Congress has the power to levy taxes. Gorsuch likewise focused on the fact the Constitution designates Congress as the branch of government with the power to set taxes. The power to reach into the pockets of the American people is just different, Gorsuch said, and it's been different since the founding. Trump's power is a one-way ratchet, Gorsuch said. Gorsuch and Barrett, who were both appointed by Trump, voiced concerns about Congress being unable to curb the president's power to impose tariffs in the future if the court were to rule they were constitutional. These 2 justices noted that a president could veto any legislation aimed at limiting executive power. It's a one-way ratchet toward the gradual but continual accretion of power and the executive branch and away from the people's elected representatives, Gorsuch said. Barrett said Congress would need a 2/3 majority to overcome a presidential veto if it wanted to approve any future limits on emergency tariffs. If Congress said, whoa, we don't like that give the president too much authority under IIEPA, it's going to have a very hard time pulling that tariff power out of IEEPA, correct? Barrett Act said. Liberal Justices Sotomayor, Kagan, and Jackson clearly opposed tariffs to upholding Trump's power to impose emergency tariffs. Crucially, what it doesn't have here is anything that refers to raising revenue. Kagan jokes out of the disputed statute. It has a lot of verbs. It has a lot of actions that can be taken under the statute. It just doesn't have the one you want. Kagan asks why presidents would ever use any other statutes if Trump is right that the emergency law allows him to blow past those limits. She noted that the administration argues that courts can't review any of Trump's emergency declarations. So that doesn't seem like much of a constraint, she said. Sotomayor questioned whether Congress would have granted a president such a wide-ranging power as tariffs without explicitly saying so in the disputed statute. She noted that Trump threatened a 10% tariff on Canada for running an ad during the World Series and a 40% tariff on Brazil because it prosecuted a former president. The point is, those may be good policies, but does a statute that gives without a limit the power to a president to impose this kind of tax? Does it require more than the word regulate? Sotomayor asked Goodman, Earthen's Libertarian Generator, who represented states opposed to the tariffs. Exactly, Goodman replied. Jackson asked whether anything in the legislative history of the statute called for tariffs. Katayal said he would have missed a single mention if he blinked. But Katayal argued that Congress would never have granted the president the power to impose tariffs, one of the most contentious issues in the country's history, by voice vote if tariffs were fake. You're saying there's nothing in the legislative history? Jackson asked. Don't, Katayal said. The question of what amounts to a major question, Robert said Trump's broad assertion of the power to set tariffs sounds like the kind of a major question that the court has previously said needs to be clearly given to a president by Congress. The so-called major question doctrine is a legal principle for cases dealing with significant presidential actions. In those cases, the Supreme Court has said presidents can't use ambiguous statutes to say they had the power to act. Sotomayor noted that the High Court previously struck down a student loan forgiveness initiative from President Biden that could have cleared away as much as $400 billion in student debt. In that case, Roberts wrote on behalf of the 6 Republican-appointed justices that Congress hadn't clearly given Biden that power, and Biden overstepped. Sotomayor and the other 2 Democratic-appointed justices dissented. On Wednesday, she suggested that the Trump administration's use of emergency powers had parallels to what Biden did, only to advance a different agenda. So Biden could have declared a national emergency and global warming, and then gotten his student loan forgiveness to not be a major question doctrine, some of you asked. Stewart argued that Biden couldn't have gotten his student loan forgiveness because it isn't a core application of the power to regulate foreign commerce, like tariffs. Barrett asked how difficult it would be for the government to refund billions of dollars in tariffs already collected. If the court rules they're illegal, would it be a complete mess? Barrett asked Caballo, the lawyer for the business that's challenging the tariffs. Caballo said the government has said it would reimburse the specific business he's representing. Other importers would have to rely on complicated rules set in trade laws to get refunds. So, a mess, Barrett asked. Catallo responded that even if reimbursement would be difficult, that's not a reason for the court to side with the administration. He added that the court could simply strike down the tariffs going forward.